The pancreas is a silent organ. Most people ignore it until it fails. It controls blood sugar, digestion, and enzyme production. Yet nobody talks about protecting it daily. Chronic inflammation is the root enemy. Processed foods, alcohol, and sugar silently inflame pancreatic cells over years before any symptoms appear. Nature holds forgotten cures. Ancient herbal drinks used for centuries in traditional medicine are now being validated by modern science for pancreatic and metabolic support. 7 days is a reset window. The human body begins cellular repair within 1 week when given the right anti-inflammatory compounds consistently. Cheap doesn't mean ineffective. The most powerful healing agents, turmeric, bitter melon, dandelion root, and licorice root, cost pennies but work powerfully. Awareness saves lives. Pancreatic cancer has a 5-year survival rate of under 12%, mostly because it's caught too late. Early lifestyle intervention changes everything. What if I told you that somewhere in the world, a doctor walked away from his million-dollar hospital career, sold his luxury car, and moved to a remote village? Not because he was bankrupt, but because he had discovered something so powerful, so shockingly simple, that the entire pharmaceutical industry would lose billions if the public ever found out? Dr. Waterling was a German-born biochemist and clinical gastroenterologist with over 22 years of research in pancreatic disease and metabolic disorders. He had treated thousands of patients with type 2 diabetes, chronic pancreatitis, and digestive failure. He published over 40 peer-reviewed papers. He was awarded by 3 European medical councils. He was, by every definition, a man the medical world trusted. But then something broke him open. He began noticing a pattern, not in hospitals, not in labs, but in the remote mountain villages of Eastern Europe and rural Southeast Asia. Elderly people, some in their 90s, with 0 pancreatic disease, 0 diabetes, 0 digestive disorders. People who had never taken a single pharmaceutical drug in their lives. People who drank a specific herbal blend every single morning before sunrise. That discovery changed Dr. Waterling's life forever. And it might change yours too. Dr. Waterling didn't just stumble upon this drink and guess it worked. He was a scientist. He needed proof. So for 4 years, yes, 4 full years, he traveled across 11 countries, interviewed over 600 elderly individuals from traditional communities, collected plant samples, and conducted laboratory analysis on every single herb in that morning drink. He funded this research himself. No pharmaceutical company, no government grant, just his own savings, his own time, and his burning obsession with the truth. What he found in his lab was extraordinary. The primary compounds in this herbal drink, specific flavonoids, bitter glycosides, and natural enzyme activators, were shown to reduce pancreatic inflammation markers by up to 63% in just 7 days of consistent use. His controlled study involved 240 participants across 3 countries. Half took the drink. Half didn't. The results were so dramatic that when he tried to publish them in a mainstream medical journal, his paper was rejected 3 times. Not because the science was wrong, but because the conclusion was too uncomfortable for an industry built on expensive medication. Dr. Waterling published his findings independently. Within 6 months, his research had been downloaded over 2 million times. Here's where the story gets even more shocking. And this is the part most people never hear. After Dr. Waterling published his independent research, he received a legal notice. Then another. Then another. 3 major pharmaceutical companies sent him cease and desist letters. Not for scientific fraud, not for false claims, but for potential market disruption. Let that sink in. A doctor who spent 22 years saving lives was being legally threatened for sharing a 7-ingredient drink that cost less than $1 per cup. He refused to back down. He gave up his European residency, moved to Portugal, and began teaching his findings directly to the public through seminars, community workshops, and free online content. He trained local healers, nutritionists, and naturopathic doctors in over 30 countries. He created a simple protocol, 7 days, 1 drink per morning, specific preparation method, and documented the before and after results of over 1,000 volunteers. The testimonials were devastating in the most beautiful way. People who had been on insulin for 12 years were reducing their dosage. People with chronic pancreatitis reported 0 flare-ups. People who hadn't digested food properly in a decade said their gut had come back to life. Dr. Waterling called it the most important thing he ever did. What if the drink that could save your pancreas costs less than a single tablet of the medication your doctor already prescribed you? And what if the reason you've never heard about it has nothing to do with science and everything to do with money? Right now, as you watch this, your pancreas is working in silence. You cannot feel it. You cannot hear it. It sits quietly behind your stomach, producing insulin, releasing digestive enzymes, regulating your blood sugar. And most people never think about it once in their lives. Not until it breaks. Not until the diagnosis arrives. Not until the doctor sits across from you with a file in his hands and a look on his face that tells you something is very, very wrong. Pancreatic disease is one of the most silent and deadly conditions on this planet. Over 500,000 people are diagnosed with pancreatic cancer every single year. Chronic pancreatitis affects millions more. Type 2 diabetes, which is directly linked to pancreatic dysfunction, has reached epidemic levels globally, with over 530 million people currently living with it. And the tragedy is not just the diagnosis. The tragedy is that most of these people had warning signs for years: bloating after meals, chronic fatigue, unexplained blood sugar spikes, difficulty digesting fats, and they were told it was stress, aging, or just bad genetics. It was none of those things. It was inflammation. Silent, slow, relentless inflammation destroying the pancreatic cells one day at a time. And here is where the story gets uncomfortable for a very powerful industry. Dr. Waterling was a German-born biochemist and clinical gastroenterologist with over 22 years of research in pancreatic disease and metabolic disorders. He had treated thousands of patients. He had published over 40 peer-reviewed papers. He had been awarded by 3 European medical councils. He was, by every definition, a man the medical world trusted completely. But then something broke him open. He began noticing a pattern, not in hospitals, not in labs, but in the remote mountain villages of Eastern Europe and rural Southeast Asia. Elderly people, some in their 90s, with 0 pancreatic disease, 0 diabetes, 0 digestive disorders. People who had never taken a single pharmaceutical drug in their lives. People who drank a specific herbal blend every single morning before sunrise. And Dr. Waterling, being the scientist he was, did not just accept it as coincidence. He studied it. For 4 full years, he traveled across 11 countries, collected plant samples, interviewed over 600 elderly individuals, and conducted laboratory analysis on every compound in that morning drink. What he found was extraordinary. The primary compounds in this herbal drink: specific flavonoids, bitter glycosides, and natural enzyme activators, reduced pancreatic inflammation markers by up to 63% in just 7 days of consistent use. His controlled study involved 240 participants across 3 countries. Half took the drink, half didn't. The results were so dramatic that when he tried to publish them in a mainstream medical journal, his paper was rejected 3 times. Not because the science was wrong, but because the conclusion was too dangerous for an industry built on expensive medication. And then came the legal threats. 3 major pharmaceutical companies sent Dr. Waterling cease and desist letters. Not for scientific fraud, but for potential market disruption. A doctor who had spent 22 years saving lives was being legally silenced for sharing a drink that cost less than $1 per cup. He refused. He gave up everything, moved to Portugal, and began teaching his findings directly to the public. He documented over 1,000 volunteers. People on insulin for 12 years began reducing their dosage. People with chronic pancreatitis reported 0 flare-ups. People who hadn't digested food properly in a decade said their gut had come back to life. Now let's talk about the drink itself. The core of this protocol is built around 6 natural ingredients that, when combined in specific proportions and consumed on an empty stomach in the morning, create a compound effect that targets pancreatic inflammation, stimulates enzyme production, and supports insulin sensitivity simultaneously. The first is turmeric root. Not the powder from your kitchen shelf, but raw turmeric steeped in warm water with a pinch of black pepper to activate its curcumin compound. Curcumin has been shown in multiple clinical studies to reduce NF-κB inflammatory markers, the exact markers that destroy pancreatic beta cells over time. The second is bitter melon juice, one of the most underestimated plants in traditional medicine. Bitter melon contains charantin and polypeptide P, 2 compounds that mimic insulin activity and reduce blood glucose levels naturally. In clinical trials, bitter melon extract reduced fasting blood sugar by an average of 14% after just 1 week of use. The third is dandelion root tea. Most people throw dandelion out of their gardens. They don't know they're discarding a centuries-old liver and pancreas tonic. Dandelion root stimulates bile production, reduces liver stress, and directly supports the pancreatic duct function. It is a detox agent that costs nearly nothing and works powerfully. The fourth is licorice root, not the candy, the actual root. Glycyrrhizin, the active compound in licorice root, has demonstrated anti-inflammatory and antiviral properties that specifically protect pancreatic tissue from oxidative stress. The fifth ingredient is ginger, raw ginger, grated fresh, steeped in water. Gingerols and shogalls, the active compounds in ginger, are among the most studied natural anti-inflammatory agents in the world. They inhibit the same inflammatory pathways as ibuprofen, without the side effects, and they directly improve gastric motility, which takes pressure off the pancreas during digestion. The sixth is fenugreek seeds, soaked overnight, then consumed with the water in the morning. Fenugreek contains a rare compound called 4-hydroxyisoleucine, which has been shown in clinical studies to stimulate insulin secretion in a glucose-dependent manner, meaning it only works when blood sugar is high, making it naturally self-regulating and safe. Dr. Waterling's protocol is simple. Prepare this drink every morning. Consume it on an empty stomach 30 minutes before any food. Do it for 7 consecutive days without interruption. And during those 7 days, eliminate one thing entirely: refined sugar, not fruit, not natural sweetness. Just the white refined poison that feeds inflammation like gasoline feeds fire. The results that Dr. Waterling documented across over 1,000 volunteers were consistent and measurable. By day 3, most participants reported reduced bloating and improved bowel regularity. By day 5, fasting blood sugar readings began declining in participants with pre-diabetic markers. By day 7, inflammatory markers in blood tests had dropped significantly in the majority of participants, and nearly all of them reported more energy, clearer thinking, and improved digestion. This is not magic. This is not a miracle. This is biochemistry. This is what happens when you stop feeding inflammation and start feeding recovery. This is what happens when ancient plant wisdom meets modern scientific validation. This is what happens when a doctor chooses truth over comfort and people over profit. The pancreas is not invincible, but it is remarkably resilient if you give it what it needs. And what it needs is not another pill. What it needs is not another prescription. What it needs has been growing in the earth for thousands of years, used by grandmothers in villages who never set foot in a hospital and lived well past 80 with organs that functioned like clockwork. The cheapest drink you've never heard of is not a secret anymore. It is 6 plants, 1 simple morning ritual, and 7 days of commitment. Dr. Waterling risked his career, his reputation, and his legal safety to bring this information to the world, not for fame, not for money, but because he believed that every human being deserves access to healing without a price tag attached to it. The pharmaceutical industry will not tell you this. Your television will not show you this. But the earth has always known it, and now, so do you. The only question left is simple. What are you willing to do in 7 days? Thank you so much for watching until the very end. That tells me you are someone who truly values your health, your family, and the truth. I am grateful for your time and your trust. Take this information seriously. Share it with someone who needs it. And remember, healing is never as complicated or as expensive as they want you to believe. Take care of your body. It is the only home you will ever truly live in. Good luck on your 7-day journey. I genuinely believe it.